Hey everyone,
All right.
back to Play, Pause, Rewind. This is episode 8. We're going to be talking about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So let's get going pretty quick. Niles, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited to talk about this series, Falcon and Winter Soldier. I mean, you and I have been watching this every week since it came out, and it's been fantastic. How are
Friday
you doing,
afternoon tradition. It's been great.
Yeah, right.
Tradition. Yeah, I'm loving having the Marvel shows every Friday to watch. I wish they didn't release at midnight, because then you gotta dodge the spoilers all day. I have to mute like 45 terms on Twitter every night. On every Thursday night before I go to bed, I go through. I'm like, what could possibly happen in tomorrow's episode that I won't want to know about? Because people online are not courteous about this type of thing.
If you say it first, then that means you came up with it. So
yeah, and it's all about the clicks and clout and all that shit. Just wait a day, people. You don't have to put spoilery images on your Twitter feed 4 hours after the episode goes live. But enough of that. We'll do brief non-spoilers and we'll just dive in pretty quick. What were your general thoughts of the show?
Yeah, I mean, initially, I think my general thoughts. I really enjoyed this series. You know, I greatly appreciated that we had this opportunity to get this great character building for Sam and Bucky, who I felt like have always been kind of side characters in past films, especially Sam. So it's really nice to see a different side of them that hasn't really been explored as much. And you know, I'm very happy about how different this series was from WandaVision, especially. I feel like WandaVision came in and it just kind of blew everyone's expectations. You know, it was trippy, it was different, it was wild, it was difficult to predict. And this series is very different.
It is.
I feel like,
it's more. I would say if you were one of the people who was kind of not feeling WandaVision because you want the more superhero action-y stuff, this is the show for you. This is that. And I will say I was impressed with the show. It was far more interesting than I thought it was going to be. I anticipated I would enjoy it because I more or less enjoy everything the Marvel Cinematic Universe makes, but I didn't think I would find it very intriguing. I thought it was going to be super straightforward, just action-adventure show with Bucky and Sam, which would have been fine, but it took a lot more chances than I expected it to, and I was pretty impressed at the ambition of it. I liked the season a lot. I think it was probably a little too busy, and we'll talk about that a little later. Just, they tried to do a lot, and they had multiple factions at play, and I think maybe they had a little bit too many characters to develop them all adequately.
I can understand that.
But and because that, it felt a little unfocused sometimes, but I had fun every week watching it. I love the characters more than I ever have. I always liked Sam and Bucky, but I never felt like they were that interesting, and now I do. And Zemo, not a spoiler because he's in the trailer. Holy shit, is his character improved after this show? He was he was a fine villain in Civil War, but I remember in that movie, everybody was like, you could have just taken him out, and it would have been fine. And now I'm like, Zemo is a great character.
Yeah, Zemo is fantastic in this series. And, you know, I think I'll probably be one of the minorities where I'll say, yes, I greatly appreciated Zemo in Civil War. I thought he was an integral part of the story. And, you know, I don't think that you can really debate that, you know, he was integral, because without him, you know, the Winter Soldier wouldn't have gone off the rails and stuff like that. But
yeah, I think the argument was more that the Civil War conflict could have just been about the philosophical differences between Tony and Steve on the Accords, and that could have driven the plot, because in the comic book Civil War, the conflict is just about the Superhero Registration Act, and that seeds the entire conflict on its own.
Right. Okay.
But I was fine with Zemo. But do you want to do spoilers, or do you have any more general?
You know, just some other things that I'd like to point out about this series is that, like you were just saying earlier, I feel like it took some good risks. It was ambitious, and it really surprised us on a lot of the things that it discussed, because this series, you know, it highlights historical racism. It highlights, you know, PTSD. It highlights, you know, soldiers trying to grapple with their past trauma. It
Yeah.
highlights, immigration and refugeeism and like all this other stuff. So it's fantastic that Marvel could produce a series where it could highlight all of those critical social issues that are still relevant today. They're happening around us all the time. And so I was very pleased to see a series like trying to take on all these diverse elements and tropes and all that stuff. It was unique and excellent, deep and interesting. Love this series. And I guess one other point that I just kind of wanted to bring up was just this fantastic line. It's not really a spoiler for the series, but I kind of felt like it spoke to one of the issues that they were discussing in the series. It was kind of a little bit more philosophical, but in episode 3, you have this great conversation between Zemo and Sam. And it's this interesting conversation about super soldiers and how the power of creating super soldiers is, inherently immoral and kind of akin to that power of, a god of saying this person gets the right to be a super soldier and this person doesn't. It's not exactly fair. And Zemo if you're curious about when it happens in the episode, it's at 29 minutes, 54 seconds. I wrote it down because I thought it was so interesting. But Zemo says, super soldiers cannot be allowed to exist. And then Sam responds, isn't that how gods talk? I thought that was one of my favorite exchanges of the series. I will probably go back and rewatch that conversation just because I thought it was so interesting. And I kind of thought that maybe it could be a thesis for the show. But, once you watch the entire series and you get to the final episode, I feel like maybe that's not as true. But I think, the whole idea of super soldiers is definitely relevant through this series. And, of course, it's going to be because of Captain America. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit further now, too.
And I like how the show touches on the weight of the symbol of the shield. What it means specifically to a black person in America. And this show deals with racism a lot. And keep in mind, as we're talking about it, we are, two white dudes talking about this. So it's not our lived experience, obviously. So we're going to do our best. But it was powerful to me to see Sam's story specifically with relation to that. And more stuff about that in spoilers, because there's a lot about that in this show. So I think we should dive in just so we can take the cuffs off. And
let's dive in, take the cuffs off. Let's get going on this. Do you have anything to kick us off? Because I have something, but
I think and maybe this is what you're talking about in your notes, but I still think the decision that they made in Avengers Endgame to, one, have the 5-year time jump, and 2, have the blip happen, not to where they reset everything back to the way it was, but have, the real consequences of the decision in Endgame have created so many storytelling opportunities for them, and it was so great because in a lot of times in comic books, when you have a big event like that, it kind of resets. And Endgame resets in a way like everybody is brought back, but the world is irrevocably changed because people were gone for half a decade and they just blipped back into existence. And WandaVision really showed kind of the existential horror that would cause when Monica comes back into existence in the hospital. Remember, and all those people too many beds and all that stuff, which in 2020 that hit very, very hard. Real world reason, but I think Falcon and Winter Soldier does a really good job of explaining the geopolitical and logistical side of that. All of a sudden, all these people are back in the country, and people were living in their homes now, and stuff like that. And in Spider-Man: Far From Home, they do a comedic bit on it where Aunt May blipped back into her apartment, and other people live there, and it's But this is this really paints the picture of how much that would suck, especially since because you get the Flag Smashers are kind of iffy for me because they're things were better during the blip. It's we saw what things looked like during the blip, and it was apocalyptic, but you can also see that borders were more open and people were more willing to just help each other out, and now that's gone because the government want their territory back. And I don't know, that's just the decision they made in Endgame to make real lasting consequences continues to pay off for them.
I would 100% agree that is one of the most interesting things that Marvel has done with this universe is the blip. I think that was exactly what I was going to talk about. Was the repercussions of the blip and just I was just thrilled to see Marvel providing us with new information about the blip and expanding the storyline, because genocide literally happened across the universe, and then all of a sudden
half of everyone died.
Yeah, and when you're watching Endgame, or at least when we watched Endgame in the theaters, of course you're not thinking about that when it's happening. You're thinking like, we got to destroy Thanos, we got to get rid of him. So what's so great about this series is that I feel like it's bringing to light all these things that I'd never even considered about the blip, like all the impacts, all the ramifications of it. Like just that one scene of them even like sitting inside of the bank trying to get the loan.
Oh, that was so tough.
And even like, even though Sam is a superhero and the guy recognizes him, the loan officer recognizes him, they're still denied the loan. And it's it's ridiculous that he denied it. But it's like, well, yeah, you don't have credit history for the past 5 years. You were dead for 5 years. Like, all these ramifications of the blip are just fascinating to me. And now I just want to know more. I want to know more and more and more,
Yeah, and one element of that scene that I kind of found eye roll inducing, though, it's like, the Avengers don't get paid at all? That is bullshit. They spend way too much time avenging for it to not be their job. Like,
right? It's absurd that they don't get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for putting their lives on the line.
Yeah, and it's like, I get he's dead now, but what the fuck, Tony? You had all these people living in this complex doing all these dangerous missions, so you didn't give them a salary?
They still got student loans to pay. They still got bills.
I mean, some of them do, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course. Especially when you see Sam's financial situation, his family's financial situation. That's a whole bucket of worms. Of being like, oh wow, they have this big investment of the boat, and it's this big source of income in their lives, and Sam literally has no money to pay for it. It's heartbreaking.
It is, and I think that first episode of the show was really wise in how patient it was. We kicked off with an action scene of Sam having to catch the whoever before they cross the border.
Doctor guy.
Yeah, there's Batrop the Leaper, I think is one of the guys' names, but we got the action, and then it was pretty patient, and it just showed what Sam and Bucky's lives are like right now, which I really liked. I was impressed with in Bucky's therapy scene, the cinematography there. I don't know, I thought it was pretty effective at conveying Bucky's emotional state. You had those really hyper close-ups on his face, which kind of showed how claustrophobic and uncomfortable he felt in that situation. Because being a soldier in the 40s, you didn't really open up about your emotions all that much. They didn't know about PTSD yet fully. And then he was a brainwashed assassin for 70-something years.
Yeah, he's an old motherfucker. He's seen some shit. So I would agree that the cinematography of that scene was very impactful, and it was nice to see Bucky trying to grapple with his emotions and get through the PTSD, and come to terms with he had no control. He was brainwashed. And
his court-mandated therapy, conditional on his part.
The poor guy, court-mandated therapy. That's a bummer. But, just one other note about, the repercussions of the blip, just really quickly, is that I just really hope that Marvel continues to expand on that. And I'm sure that they will, especially in the multiverse of madness and, Iron Wars or whatever it is, or
Armor Wars. They got Ironheart, Armor Wars. Miss
you.
Marvel is coming up too.
Yeah,
we got the first set photo of that this week. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, I didn't see that.
It was on our Instagram.
Yeah, if you want to follow us on Instagram, we're trying to stay up to date with all relevant news that's happening in the industry. So feel free to give us a follow.
Yeah, we post little updates on news because we stopped doing it here, so we just put it on Instagram. But the blip is a great storytelling opportunity.
I definitely want to see I just had a bunch of questions after this series, I was like, oh, what about international trade? What about peace treaties? What about food and agriculture? What about government authorities? How is that disrupted? How are these things disrupted by the blip? It just spawns so many questions for me. So I really hope Marvel continues to explore that.
And I think there's more to talk about that when we get to Sam's arc and the end of the show, because that's, I guess that transitions us. Talking about the blip is a good jumping point to transition to the Flag Smashers and their motivation.
Let's talk about the Flag
led by
Smashers,
Carly Morgenthau. What did you think about them overall?
I like them overall. They're definitely not my favorite ragtag gang of villains in the universe. But I think they were a fitting opposition considering the time and considering the blip. And their motivation absolutely makes sense. If there's in a sense, two different people in the world right now. There's people that came together during those 5 years, and tried to build and tried to unite and progress and find some way forward into a future of these very few people. And then there's these, other group of people that just came back into existence and they want everything to go back to how it was. They're not going to be as open to refugees or immigration. They're going to take a harder line against things. And, I think that's, that motivation for the Flag Smashers is, it's comes through very well for me, and I feel like it's very appropriate for the series. What about you? What were your thoughts?
I found them kind of a mixed bag. I think their motivation was really interesting and good. They saw elements of a better world in the time that they were here during the blip, and then they saw that all evaporate and disenfranchise millions of people. I think that's effective, but where I think it falls down a little bit is then Carly blows up a building with people in it. She didn't have to do that. And then at the end, she's like, kill the hostages if we have to. It's like and I saw a lot of people saying this throughout the show, but it's like Marvel wrote their motivation as too sympathetic, so felt the need to make sure we knew they were the villains at certain points in time. And it's like, I don't even think you needed to do that, especially with Sam's speech at the end, because kind of like Eric in Black Panther, Killmonger, the points he's making are valid and his methods are too extreme. I mean, I guess he's going to just kill a bunch of people too, but the point of both antagonists, I think, is to teach the protagonist how to go forward better than they did before. And I think Sam makes that point pretty clearly at the end of the show. But I don't think you needed to have Carly blow up buildings and threaten to kill hostages. I think it would have been fine as just adversaries to Sam and Bucky and Walker. And then the ending could have played out pretty much the same without that extra level of violence from the Flag Smashers. In my opinion,
I would agree. Yeah, I'd say the terrorist acts are a little over the top. You don't really need them in the story, but I guess you do need them just to make it seem like, oh yeah, they're serious or whatever. Yeah. But I do appreciate Marvel creating these more sympathetic villains, like you were just talking about Killmonger. Like, you can understand the reasoning for why they're doing this stuff, which is I appreciate them.
They have justifiable grievances, and and it's different than a Thanos or something, because Thanos is clearly just a psychopath, and the Infinity War humanizes him a little bit because the story is from his perspective. So of course he's going to look good. It's his point of view that we're following. Which is why he's such an incredible asshole in Endgame. He's the same guy. We're just seeing him for the way other people see him now. I want to talk about Endgame and Infinity War more in depth in the future, but I think everyone gets Thanos wrong. I don't think they understand him. It's like Thanos was always a dickhead. In Infinity War, he was never good. He was never right. He's trying to satiate his ego and prove to the universe that his horrible plan was right. And we are just seeing it we're seeing his actions through his eyes in that movie. And then in Endgame, he has the exact same mentality. We're just seeing him for who he is rather than who he thinks he is. It's my little tangent there. But I appreciate the more sympathetic villains. And the only thing is, I think, like I was saying, I think all the violence from Carly and them could have been mostly cut out, with the exception of when she accidentally kills Battlestar, Lamar Hoskins, because that totally works for the Walker's descent into sort of villainy. And totally works with the conflict between the three parties, because now she has crossed a line, and that would have been a more dramatic action had she not previously blown up a building with a bunch of tied up officers in it. Like it would have had more weight if she hadn't had those violent actions earlier.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, let me pose you. Let me ask you this question. Do you feel like that they, like I'm not as in tune with a lot of the news and stuff like that around this. A lot of the news that I get is through Instagram sometimes, but I get it through other sources. But I feel like you're a little bit more in tune with the news about like stuff going on behind the scenes here. But do you feel like that maybe there was a whole kind of storyline of the Flag Smashers that was like cut or reduced or something? Because I feel like that there was like some character development there, but like it just wasn't enough.
I did see there was an article that confirmed there was a storyline cut. YouTuber Nando V Movies had a theory where he thought the cut storyline was a pandemic. And I don't know if that is... I think the showrunner said the cut storyline was not that, but if it was that, it would make sense, because if the Flag Smashers are after medical supplies to help treat sicknesses, and the like Mama Donia character that they talk about that they have the funeral for, like she was dying of tuberculosis, but it's a situation where no one on screen says tuberculosis. It's all in like ADR with people facing away. So it's like it could have been that she died of this pandemic related thing, and they cut it because it's just too real for in the moment, and which is totally understandable. And that's also unconfirmed, but Nando made a good good video about it, and it does make sense. Because like in the pre-blip world, especially if there was this pandemic happening there and they were dealing with it as one people, and then all of a sudden the blip happens back, and all of a sudden it's like, actually, we're going to cordon this off and put you all back in your thing, and you have your own resources, and we're not helping you. Like that, that, adds another element to it that would work pretty well. But there was something cut. I don't know what it was, though.
That would make sense. Yeah, because I was very unclear about the Auntie Donna or whatever her name was.
Mama Donia.
Domia.
Auntie Donna. That's a Netflix show.
There's a show on Netflix called Auntie Donna's like big whole house of fun. Highly recommend it.
They're actually those people who made that show are actually like personal friends with the host of a podcast I like called The Weekly Planet. Yeah.
Well, anyways, going back to the series. I guess one thing that I did have the kind of like a grievance with the Flag Smashers was that kind of like missing storyline, because I feel like that could have added a little bit more to their characters, especially Carly and some of the other super soldiers that were there. That would have been interesting. And I honestly kind of feel like Carly's message, or at least her storyline, deserved, at least when I initially finished the episode, like the final episode and everything, I felt like her storyline and her message could have used a better conclusion. Maybe that's just me, but it was kind of nice to see like the new Captain America bring her body back, and like after she dies, and just to me, I feel like her message of uniting maybe could have used like a better conclusion, but he did a good job with his final speech, summarizing their cause.
I think that plays into one of my complaints with the series, though, is this: there's so much going on. Between you have Sam and Bucky, you have John Walker and Hoskins, you have Zemo, you have the Dora Milaje showing up, you have the Flag Smashers, you have Sharon Carter, you have Isaiah Bradley, you have Bucky's relationship with the old man Yuri, whose son he killed when he was the Winter Soldier. It's like, that is a lot to ask of your 6-hour show to cover, which is probably why whatever this cut plot line was got cut. And I think as much as I liked every single element in the show, since there was so much going on, it made it feel a little too busy, and not everything got the focus it deserved. Like when at the end, when Bucky goes back to Yuri to tell him about what he did to his son, like going into the final episode, I was starting to expect, like, is this going to be a season 2 thing? Because I don't know how they're going to wrap this up in a satisfying way, and I would have liked more from that. Honestly, we didn't get a whole lot of it, and it's in the first episode, and it's completely dropped until the final episode. So someone who's not thinking about it so much may have forgotten about the old man.
Yeah, I was hoping they would have touched back on Yori's plotline and maybe even the bartender chick and maybe wrap that up. But those characters at the end of the day, they're kind of there for Bucky's development, which is fine.
I liked that date scene though when he and the bartender were hanging out, and I like when she asked him how old he is. He's like 106.
Yeah.
He just thinks he's joking, but he's dead serious, and he doesn't elaborate or explain to her his history. And it's also funny because, like, in the Captain America museum, he is a prominent figure.
Yeah.
Museum. It's like...
Yeah, it's like, dude, he's right. You should know this if you've ever been to the museum.
I just imagine her, like, going to the museum later on and seeing his picture and be like, oh, he wasn't kidding. He is this...
Oh, he's a killer.
Yeah, I guess, dude... I guess his Winter Soldier activities are not declassified or anything.
Yeah, I guess that
to the general public, at least, which seems fair. That would be a pretty big black mark to have on someone.
Yeah, I actually was reading an article about that earlier. I think it was like Screen Junkie or something like that. But it was talking about that plot line of like, or not plot line, just like the general knowledge of the Winter Soldier and Bucky Barnes is a little inconsistent in the series. And in the MCU in general, because it's like, after, I guess he could be like, secret before Civil War, not many people are going to know about him, and it's...
Oh, shit. Uh-oh. Niles is still there.
Like, just the Winter Soldier. What? Yeah.
Oh, you cut out for a second.
Cut out?
Yeah. But Whoops. We're back. Okay.
We'll get that out in editing or something. I don't know.
Nah.
But anyways,
it's gonna stay.
Yeah. Well, with the Winter Soldier, the article that I was reading said that there were some inconsistencies with his character through this series and through the MCU of like, what does the general public know about the Winter Soldier?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of comes to light in this series of like, well, after the Civil War, it seemed like there was this, he's the most wanted man in the world because he blew up that place. So shouldn't everyone know who the Winter Soldier is?
I think by that point they know about the Winter Soldier, but they don't necessarily know it is Bucky Barnes who is the Winter Soldier. But I remember up until Captain America, the Winter Soldier, there is almost no knowledge about him. Because remember Natasha is explaining something to Steve, and I think the line is directly like, most of the intelligence community doesn't believe he exists. Those who do call him the Winter Soldier. And then after that movie and then Civil War, like, knowledge of him, at least in government and intelligence circles, is known, but I don't know about general public. Like, none of the characters we follow in Civil War are outside of the Avengers or the CIA. So
yeah. Well, and then isn't like in Superman, because I remember Spider-Man Far From Home, where they're doing like the news segment and they were kind of recapping the blip and like how people came back. I think that they mentioned like, oh yeah, these badass superheroes, they're the ones who like fought Thanos and like brought everyone back to life. I don't remember if they showed Bucky's graphic in that or not.
No, they don't. They just do an in memoriam for the ones that died. It's like a really shittily put together high school PowerPoint in memoriam. It's really funny.
Yeah.
Because I remember like one of the ones they have in their PowerPoint is Vision, but they don't have a good picture of Vision, so it's just this like blurry picture of him from really far away.
Spot on, yeah. That makes sense. Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, if you know who fought against Thanos, I guess it's just not clear to me sometimes, like, oh, does everyone know who fought against Thanos, or like who was involved in Infinity War and Endgame, like all that stuff, but that's fine. We don't really need that kind of like consistency, because the story is really just, about these new heroes and moving forward.
Yeah.
And all that. What should we talk about next?
Let's see. Did we talk about Bucky enough? I think we're good on Bucky. I liked him. I think he could have used more. But I think the show is ultimately more a Sam show than it is a Bucky show.
Yeah. I guess one grievance that I had with Bucky was that in the first episode or whatever, in his therapy, it feels to me like it's established that he is now a private citizen, where it's like, you have to go to these court-mandated therapies, you're a private citizen now, you can't do anything. And then the next episode, he just jumps right back into the action with Sam.
Mm-hmm. I think he I think he does jump back in as a private citizen just because he has a vested interest in making sure this doesn't go to shit.
Sure.
Which I did love that like big three element that they talk about. What is it like? Wizards, aliens, and
cyborgs.
Yeah.
Androids, cyborgs.
Androids, yeah. Androids, aliens, or wizards. I also love the interaction about the Hobbit. I thought that was I read The Hobbit when it first came out in 1937. One thought I had about that, just a stray thought that I think is really funny, is Bucky may have no knowledge of the existence of the Lord of the Rings because Tolkien wrote the Lord of the Rings in the 50s and Bucky would have been the Winter Soldier by then, and he just may not have had time to be exposed to the films or the existence of that book, which is really funny to me.
That's a really good point. I hadn't even considered that.
So Bucky's Tolkien knowledge may be exclusively about The Hobbit. And also, I saw this pointed out online, that the initial publishing of The Hobbit was 1937, but it was only like a handful of copies. So that would mean that Bucky Barnes, like big, like buff kind of playboyish Bucky Barnes pre-World War II, was one of the first ever owners of The Hobbit.
Maybe he was good friends with Tolkien or something, you know?
I bet Steve bought it for him. That seems accurate.
Yeah, that would make sense. Like some good little camaraderie there, yeah.
But in answer to your grievance, though, I think in episode 2 or 3, whichever it is, Walker kind of just like supersedes Bucky's private citizenship, because remember he talks to the therapist. He's like, Bucky's not going to be around as much anymore. And then I love she's like, who authorized that? And then he's just like, me.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah. It was just one of those like technical, like logical things. Like, wait a second. Wait, how is he able to do that? Maybe there was something more there where they had to cut out for time. But I don't know.
Exactly. I don't know what the relation, because towards the end, remember, they have the building surrounded for the situation, and Bucky just waltzes up, and they're like, Sergeant Barnes, and they let him in to do his thing. So it's like, I think the superhero community just has their own level of jurisdiction in this universe. They can kind of do whatever. I would like to see Bucky get a suit at some point. Whatever wolf is supposed to mean, I'd like them to show me what a Wakandan named White Wolf looks like.
Yeah, maybe it'll look something like Black Panther or something. Maybe
yeah.
He doesn't really need it.
No, he doesn't. I'd like him to have an identity, because he's not going to be the Winter Soldier forever, because that has a lot of baggage tied to it. You know?
Yeah, that was another grievance I had. I'm sure a lot of other people shared it. At the end, you know, the title changes from Falcon and the Winter Soldier to Captain America and the Winter Soldier, which is very nice. And of course, the show is focusing more on Sam and Sam's development. Mm-hmm. But why is he still called the Winter Soldier when at the end of the series here, he's accepted his nightmares, he's talked to Yuri, he's like accepted the fact that he was brainwashed, and he's come to terms with who he is now. So why isn't he called the White Wolf?
I think in universe he is not called the Winter Soldier anymore, but to us on a like meta level, he hasn't been given a new name yet. I mean, he has the White Wolf, and he mentions it in this series, but we don't know what that is yet.
Yeah.
And we'll probably get something on that in Captain America 4, which is announced and is happening. The showrunners who did this are involved in it. And it will focus on Sam Wilson, Captain America. Presumably Bucky will be in it as well as the perpetual Captain America sidekick. But I want to save Sam for a little bit later, because I think we'll have a lot to say about him. But let's talk about John Walker, speaking of Captain America.
Yeah.
I found this character very intriguing and a great sort of pseudo-antagonist. What are your thoughts on Walker and his trajectory? Also, just before we jump into that, Wyatt Russell was so good in this role. All the performances were good, but Wyatt Russell really brought his A game here, and I feel so bad for him that he's gotten like death threats and harassment from idiot fans. Like, you're supposed to hate John Walker, you fools. Like, don't harass an actor.
Yeah, it's the same thing with like the whole thing in Star Wars with Kelly
Marie Tran and Daisy Ridley and John Boyega.
Yeah,
everyone who's not a white man, or is, I guess, in this case, but Yeah, anyone
Well,
who's not a white man in Star Wars gets harassed by the worst people in the fan base.
Well, yeah, and it's just fans taking the series too seriously, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I know that Captain America means a
This
lot.
instance is in the Star Wars one. It's just racism, right? Like,
oh yeah, totally,
different things. Where
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just saying, it's kind of the same thing of being like fans just being like overzealous and being like, this is my character. This I because I love the character.
Like, how dare you take up that shield? Like, bro, he didn't. He didn't. He's playing a character.
How dare you make creative choices for a property that I have no ownership to?
Yeah.
How dare you?
I don't get. How do you get in that headspace where you're like, I must personally attack Wyatt Russell for playing a dick on TV? Like, what?
Those people really just need to take a step back and just, take a deep breath and, just go punch yourself in the face a few times.
Yeah, restrict your access to a keyboard. Yes. Like,
yeah.
Don't.
This is a character. This is not like a real person. Like Wyatt Russell is a real person.
He is.
John Walker is a character, and he did a phenomenal job playing John Walker.
Yeah.
And I mean, full disclosure though, I will say, first episode when he came out of there, and he didn't have any lines. First episode, but he
just
came
looks
out
like a goofy weirdo.
I was irate. I was mad. I hated him. But the next episode, I did not hate him. I became very sympathetic to him. I feel like the series did a great job of like establishing us in a sympathetic light. And at the end of the day, he made some bad decisions, and in the long haul, he's going to be a very complex character moving down the line with U.S. Agent.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, with this series, his intentions were good. He was obviously a good guy.
Yeah,
he just wasn't making the best decisions.
No, and I think that, and this has been repeated to death by every outlet who talks about this, and it is the most obvious thing, but I'll say it anyway. It's like in the first Captain America movie, before Steve gets the serum, he's talking to Dr. Erskine, who's played by Stanley Tucci. No one forget that Stanley Tucci has been in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but his big point, and the reason they chose Steve is because he's not the perfect soldier, but he's a good man, and that was the entire driving factor for Erskine to select Steve for the serum. And I think in contrast, and everyone thinks in contrast, because it's very clear and deliberate, Walker is the perfect soldier. He's a good guy, but he's the perfect soldier first, and that's his problem. And I also felt sympathy for him and also detested him at the same time, because it's like in the first episode, that ending of the episode made it very clear, if it wasn't already, that this show is going to be dealing with racism and white privilege, because Walker is such a great, again, as a white guy talking about this, a grain of salt here, but Walker is such a perfect example of what white privilege looks like, I think. Like, he did good work in the military, and he may or may not deserve what he got, but he didn't get that shield because of his merit. He got it because he fit the image of what the government wanted Captain America to look like. And and it's spelled out more explicitly later in the show, but like, they didn't want a black cap. They wanted a white cap. And that's why they kind of guilted Sam into giving them up the shield or giving them the shield back. And he, and I think the one messy part of his character, and I don't know if you agree or not, but was in the finale when they give him like a little mini redemption to saving the people. I don't think they should have done that.
No, I disagree. That redemption of him like being like, okay, I could either chase after the bad guys over there, or I could try and save this group of hostages.
Mm-hmm.
And he throws down the shield and he kind of like sighs, like, I have to be the good guy here. And he goes and tries to do it. And that's why, I feel like at the end of the day, he is kind of a good-natured guy. He's going to try and do the right thing. He's just, he's a lot more complex than that. He's got some anger issues. He's got some, difficulty controlling himself. He's got like a power complex,
Yeah. I don't think he's destined for good things, though. I don't know if you agree with that or not. Like,
I agree.
I think he is definitely going in a sinister direction. And I think the reason I have a problem with his redemption is, one, it's confusing for the character trajectory for me, because to me they're very clearly setting him up to be a villain in the future, not a villain who loves that he's a villain, but he's, I'll get into more of that in a second. But I think I liked the redemption in the moment. I liked seeing him try to be good and try to help out Bucky and Sam, but I just don't think he should have been involved in that sequence much. I think he should have gotten his shit rocked pretty quickly and then not been a factor. And maybe he does one thing quickly, but once Lamar gets killed by Carly and he smashes a guy's face in with the shield, I think that is his like Anakin Skywalker murdering the children moment. Like, he's gone too far. He is now Darth Vader type of thing. And
well, I mean, even Anakin, he had that glimmer of hope in him all the way to the end of Return of the Jedi. Where it's like, okay, I'm gonna try and pull you back to the light side. So I think that's kind of. Well, I do agree with you that, yes, I feel like that is his defining moment of being like, okay, he's no longer Captain America. He is U.S. agent at that point. He's kind of a bad guy.
Yeah.
But I think, he's got a little bit of hope in him of being right. But I would definitely agree that in the long haul, it's not going to be right for him.
Yeah.
He's going to be a bad guy, and it's going to be messy and bloody and awful.
I think he's meant to be a tragic character. And one of the showrunner, the director, somebody involved came out and said a really boneheaded thing about Walker recently. Like, it seemed like he was saying, like, we tried to write Walker as a character that everybody could really get on board with and like, and I think we succeeded at that. And I'm like, what? Are you? No,
about that.
No, man, that's not how he plays at all. Regardless of if that was their intention, it's not a great intention to have the guy do the things he does and say we should like him, because we shouldn't. But that's not what I got from his character. I got that he was a pretty good guy who is confused about what's right and wrong and ultimately loses himself because he doesn't have the principles that Steve had, and that a real hero has, because he acted out of revenge as soon as his friend got killed.
As soon as he had the powers and as soon as it happened, like, I'm on a revenge streak. And Captain America would never have, or Steve Rogers would have never done that.
Which is the point Zemo makes too. But I think, and I may be giving the show, especially after what the director came out and said, I may be giving the show way too much credit with this, especially with what we talked about last time with DoD script approval on these types of projects. But my very generous read on the Walker character, I think, is that he is kind of a statement on how the United States treats its troops and its veterans. Because when he and Lamar are talking in like the cafe or whatever, or the train station, when he's considering taking the serum secretly, and they talk about how they got the Medal of Honor, and Walker says, that was the worst day of my life, which to me says that they did something pretty bad and they were rewarded for it with one of the highest honors in the military. And then when so the U.S. government wants them to do that type of stuff, and they tell them that. But then when he's caught on camera murdering a man with a shield, then the government turns on him because now he's a PR problem. What he did may or may not have been worse or better than what he did previously, but now it's on camera, and now people are upset. So they very loudly and publicly discharge him. Less than honorable discharge. But then immediately he's approached by Julia Louis-Dreyfus' character, who my read is she's from the government, just a shadowy side of it, and they recruit him back. Because at the end, when he gets the U.S. agent uniform, that's the same room where they discharged him. That's the same room. So it's like the government publicly wants to denounce him and separate themselves from him, but secretly they want that edge. They want that dark side because they can use him to do the shady shit they want.
Yeah.
So my take was that the government wants Walker to do what he was doing. They just don't want him to be seen doing it because that reflects poorly on them.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good read of him, and I think that is exactly what they were trying to do, or at least something along those lines of being like, yes, this is how they kind of treat U.S. soldiers is that they'll have them go off and do these great things, and then the minute that they cast the military in a poor light or anything like that, they distance themselves.
I think they rely on the fact that we don't have a lot of visibility into a lot of wars and stuff like that, and they're trained to be combatants first. Like, I think, and I'm not trying to shit on the military entirely here. I think there's a lot of gray area there, but we are involved across the globe in many places we should not be. But I'm just saying, I think the government is willing to treat our soldiers as disposable as soon as it becomes advantageous to do so.
I agree, and I think it's a shame, but I think it is a reality that we have to grapple with. And I think it kind of circles back to the point of white privilege here, because you juxtapose that against what happened to Isaiah in the series. So very different, situations, but they're still very much in line with one another. Like, John Walker goes out, kills a man in the 21st century as Captain America. Back in the 40s, Isaiah, I can't remember his last name.
I think it was the 50s. Isaiah Bradley is his name.
50s, yes. Isaiah Bradley. So he's another super soldier, and he defies orders and goes and breaks out a bunch of POWs and brings them back safely. And in turn, for doing that, he is punished. He is then experimented on for decades secretly by the government, and is basically hidden away from the light of day.
He's imprisoned and erased.
Yeah, he's erased, and it's very different situations, but they're still very similar. So
what it's even more similar to is in the first Captain America movie, Steve finds out Bucky is one of the POWs that's gone missing. Steve defies orders, goes behind enemy lines, rescues all the POWs, and is celebrated as a hero, becomes Captain America, gets his own squad, and becomes one of the most powerful people in the fight in Europe.
Right. Yeah. It's very stark just how different that is. Like, if a white man does it, it's okay. And if a black man does it, you can't allow that. And it's
very overt.
And it would be the same thing, if it was if Isaiah Bradley, if he was still moving around and being active, and he went out and killed someone in the middle of the day in the 21st century, I don't think that he would have just been discharged. I feel like there would have been a whole trial, a whole very public trial, like on an international scale.
Being even more realistic, though, it probably wouldn't have even made it to the trial. And speaking of that, I think the moment in outside of Isaiah Bradley's house when Bucky and Sam are having an argument in the street, and I just remember when I was watching it, I saw out of focus in the background a cop car pull up, and I'm like, holy shit, okay, how horrible is it that in our country all you have to do is see a cop car out of focus when your character is black and you know exactly what's about to happen, because they come up and they talk to Bucky like, is this man bothering you? And he's like, no, fuck off.
We're having a conversation.
We're having a conversation, and then it only de-escalates because Bucky's like, do you know who this is? Like, this is an Avenger, you jackasses. And then immediately the cops are like, oh my god, can I get a picture? It's like, no, asshole.
Yeah.
But this and Get Out, I think, are both two great examples of, they just show that you, as a viewer, about these problems. You know how clear-cut it is, because spoilers for Get Out, I'm sorry, but at the end of that movie, when you see those police siren colors, you have your heart stops, because you know exactly what would happen in that situation. Even people who deny that systemic racism is a thing and that the police are problematic in our country, it's like, you know the truth of the situation, because you had that emotional reaction too. But that was effective scene. Effectively, I think that's good social commentary in a series when you can generate that emotional response in your viewer without even having to say anything. Because I think you probably had the same reactions. Like, before the cops even got out of the car, you knew what was coming next.
Oh yes, I've seen far too much like TV. The Wire, all those kinds of cop episodes where it's just like, oh yeah, as soon as you see like a cop pulling up in that kind of looking neighborhood, you know, with the chain link fences, and it's like historically, you know, low income black neighborhood, it's like, okay, yes, this is about to be messy. So
bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I applaud Disney and Marvel for, you know, being bold enough to show that.
And to be that overt. Film. I did not expect that from Disney.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially from Disney. Yeah, I feel like, you know, just considering the history of Walt Disney. It's surprising, but I'm glad to see that they're, you know, embracing change and they're bringing these stories to light and kind of showing that perspective.
And I'll give genuine praise to the Marvel side of the equation for doing that. I think Disney, as with any of these massive corporations, Marvel is a big company too, but Disney is the bigger corporation. Full cynical brain here, but they're allowing this type of commentary because they've deemed it profitable in the current environment.
Yes.
If it were not profitable, Disney would not have greenlit that idea. But credit where credit is due to the writing team and the actors and everyone involved for effectively portraying it. I felt, at least, and being willing to go there in a genre and series that I don't think most of us expect to have that overt of social commentary.
Yeah, so speaking of, why don't we transition into the Sam discussion? Let's discuss the character of Sam because, you know, he's got this great speech at the end of the series, at the final episode, where it touches on historic or institutional racism, but it also touches on a lot of other complex issues like immigration and, you know, the social problems, the socioeconomic, political problems of the blip. And he speaks to, you know, the legitimacy of the flag smasher kind of cause to a certain degree. What did you think of the speech, Dylan?
Yeah, I thought it was really great, and I think it's relevant to our real world just as a lot of the show is. But I mean, because you see people out in the streets dying for these causes and going to these protests and putting themselves in incredible danger. And Sam's point of being like, and I'm not equating the protests in our world to what Carly did. What she did crosses a lot more lines, and I don't think the Black Lives Matter protests really do cross any lines, if I'm being frank. But when Sam is like, this girl died for what she believed in, and that should tell you how valid it is, and she is right in a lot of ways. And I love the politician. It's like, but it's complicated. You don't understand. It seems like that's your job, man. Do better. Like, if you're going to be in a position with that much power, it's your responsibility to solve complicated problems. And it's not, no one said governance is meant to be easy. It's very complicated, but you got to do it right. You're responsible for the well-being of everyone under your care. I really thought the speech was really powerful and effective. And I like his arc in relation to being Black and wearing the Captain America mantle, because I mean, he really, and you see it with his nephews playing with the shield. When Bucky wakes up and sees them doing that, it's like you see the importance of a Black man holding that symbol and changing the meaning of it a little bit in that. And the fact that Sam can kind of take ownership of it, I thought was really great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would 100% agree that the finale speech was just breathtaking. Like, as I was watching it, my mouth was just like, you know, totally open. Like, my jaw was on the floor. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, not only is that new suit amazing.
It looks so great.
It's incredible. I love that new suit, and I love the way it functions and like how he used it during the fights. And it was just,
he braces himself with the wings at that one point.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Because since he doesn't have the serum, he finds other ways to compensate when he's dealing with superpowered people. I like that.
Yeah, and you know, he had a great workout montage, which was fun.
Yeah, I like the training montage. A good training montage is always fun. I also I saw this pointed out somewhere, that the importance of Sam not immediately taking up the Captain America mantle, and because of, I mean, Isaiah Bradley points it out pretty significantly. It's like Sam probably had hesitations because of the connotations associated with American iconography in relation to being Black. I'm sure he was hesitant for that reason. And I also love when he's finally willing to accept the mantle, Bucky apologizes. He's like, when Steve told me he was going to do this, neither of us really thought about like what it would mean for a black person to take this up. And it's like, how could we have realized that? And like, that's an acknowledgement of his privilege and his blindness to the issue. And it was just like, it is just super mature of him. It's like, I was wrong and I put you in an uncomfortable situation and I'm sorry. Like, that's all you got.
Yeah, they're great buds, and
they are. I like their the development of their friendship a lot.
Yeah, and when they first announced this series, I thought it was just kind of going to be like, good cop, bad cop kind of situation, or two bad
It's like a buddy cop type thing.
Yeah, a whole buddy cop thing where they're both just kind of bad. And they were both terrific. It didn't feel like a buddy cop kind of thing. It felt a lot more dynamic than that. And Sam is, clearly the main character of this series for me.
I agree.
Bucky's, yeah, absolutely. Bucky's still very important. But, I feel like the series definitely provided a lot of background for Sam and gave him a lot of character development. We got to learn about his family. We got to learn about, his family's hardships. We got to, understand more about how he approaches situations. He's not always just going to go in and punch his way out of, the situation. He's going to go in and he's going to try and talk them down. He's going to try and find a diplomatic solution. And that is exactly what, Captain America's all about. He was definitely the right person to choose for it. I don't think there's any question about that.
No. And I do love that Sam will try to talk to his opponents first. And that plays back to his character introduction in Winter Soldier, because when Steve meets him, that's what he does. He does counseling for soldiers after their combat tours are done. And so he has that sort of background. And that's one thing I love about Steve and Sam's relationship is in Endgame, we see Steve doing that type of counseling for people. So in a way, Steve was carrying on Sam's legacy in that way, and now Sam is carrying on Steve's legacy as Captain America.
That's a very good point.
Taking ownership of it and making it his own. And yeah, I mean, as a side note, that suit is epic.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love the comic accurate suits, like with WandaVision and now with Sam. They just look phenomenal.
Yeah, I love that Marvel has gotten to the point where they can embrace the comic accurate suits. I mean, they modify some of them a little bit. I mean, from the pictures I've seen, he's 100% in line with the comics, and he looks so great in it. And it's a great looking costume.
If I was a 5-year-old kid, I know I'd want that action figure, man. That action figure looks badass.
Yeah, it was great. I love the helicopter action scene too, where he talks to the lady. He finds out she's a pilot. It's like, okay, you need to jump to the pilot seat and just yeets that guy out of the helicopter.
That was insane. Whoa, dude.
Yeah. In general, Sam is a great protagonist, and I would say, I know comic books have this cyclical nature where they always return to the status quo. It's like Steve Rogers returns as Captain America at some point. If they do that in the movies, Marvel are cowards. Sam Wilson, Captain America now. Steve Rogers is gone. He was a great character. He had a great run. He had a satisfying ending. Leave him alone. Sam Wilson is Captain America. Do not walk back, especially after the statements you made in this series. It's almost inexcusable to have Sam give that mantle up, unless it's to a next generation hero in 10 years or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would be open to, Steve coming back in the 4th Captain America movie. Maybe he's just the wise old sage kind of character or something like that.
Yeah, on that note, do you think he's alive?
I don't know. I'm fine either way, honestly, at this point. If he's going to be in Captain America 4, it needs to be a tiny, tiny, tiny role of him just being here's some wisdom, or here's some guidance, or here's an idea you didn't think of, or something like that.
A one scene type of thing.
Exactly. And I would be open to seeing a series of him as Captain America returning the Infinity Stones, going through his life and getting to the right point and dropping the Infinity Stone off. That could be interesting. But Steve Rogers as a character, retire him otherwise. Don't give it back. Sam is now Captain.
Yeah, I don't want to see young Steve Rogers chronologically after the ending of Endgame. I'm fine with a one scene cameo, like you're talking about, kind of like a Yoda in The Last Jedi thing, where he shows up to impart some wisdom. Or I'm also fine with if they introduce Wolverine during World War II or something, Steve could be in that. Because I found out recently, I should have known this, but the first Captain America movie takes place over like 3.5 years. So there's a lot of time when they're in Europe, and Wolverine, I think, has some history being in World War II. So whenever they introduce the X-Men, they could do that. But I don't need to see the characters that we've watched for the last decade return after their stories are done. Marvel has so many characters to draw on.
Yeah.
So just don't do it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, one other thing that I'll say about Sam is that I think his tribute to Isaiah at the end was amazing. I honestly teared up a little bit.
I did too.
It was so heartwarming to be like, okay, now no one will ever forget you. You are here in the museum. You are part of history, and that's that.
Yeah, and you're getting the recognition that you earned decades ago, and
it was very touching.
Really. And I also love that it's not the thesis of the show is not like we solved racism, go team. It's very much like Sam is like, we have so much work to do, and every time I put on this suit, I know people are going to hate me for it, but I still have to do it because it's right, and I can change the perception of that. Like, it's because a lot of movies, mostly the ones made by white people, probably that deal with racism, they have like the surrogate for the racist white person who meets a black person, and then they become friends. And by the end of the movie, they're great friends. And that's the movie statement. It's like they solved racism 70 years ago, which doesn't address the fact that it's still around. So I think it's a mature route for the show to take on that topic. That it's like we haven't fixed anything. It's just a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I appreciate that as well. And it's about progress. It's not about perfection. Yeah,
it's about like another step in the journey. Which absolutely. It's like it's kind of, it relates to it, but reading my like Stormlight Archive books, recently I finished the third one this week, but one of the characters poses the question, I think to himself, or someone posed it to him. It's like, what's the most important step a man can take? And the answer to the question is the next one. Like the most important step is always the next one. The important thing is that you are continuing on the journey to better yourself and the world around you.
And I think that's a good point, because the next one implies either forward or backward. So it's up to you. It's your decision to make the right choice.
But it's like you've started the journey, but you have to keep continuing the journey and see it to the end, whenever that is.
Speaking of journey, this isn't a great segue, but I was just thinking maybe we could talk about another character.
I think so. You want to talk about Zemo?
Yes, let's talk about Zemo. I wanted to talk about Zemo.
Stole the show. Yes. Stole the show completely. maybe to a point where it was detrimental that he but he was great. I only say that because Zemo is not ultimately as central to the plot as we may have thought, but he definitely is the highlight of the episodes he's in.
I would agree. Yeah, he's only in like I think 2 episodes, really.
Three, I think 3 maybe. Well, like 3. No, he's in 4, but he's a major presence in 3, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Well, I think he's actually more of a major presence in 2 episodes. Like I think like the 3rd and the 4th episode, he's a bigger presence. But then he is still in like the 5th episode and the 6th episode. But he has a very minor reduced role. That's my only concern. I wish he had more screen time. Yes, he was a great part of the show. That's kind of like one of my only complaints about him. He's such an interesting character, and this show definitely gave him more layers. We got to see a lot more of him that wasn't given to us in Civil War. Because in Civil War, he's just kind of like there to, get.
He's an instigator. He's not a main focus.
The Winter Soldier started to avenge Sokovia.
Right.
It was great. I think it was interesting to see like how calculated he was, and that he had like all this money. I had no idea that he was rich, that he was a baron.
He is a baron. Because he's not presented as that in Winter Soldier.
Not at all.
Civil War.
He's presented as this kind of like worm who like found his way into the government.
He's ex-military,
Yeah, and I liked the dynamic between him and his like butler. character. I thought that was really funny. Like they're speaking the other language on the plane of being like, oh yeah, give them the
give
shit.
them the
like
shit. Yeah. I just enjoyed how like he's definitely evil and doing a lot of bad things, but he also just like he has a great appreciation for Black culture.
Yeah.
He's just like
what was the artist they were talking about? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but I love his description of it. He's like, it's complete. It's a masterpiece. Comprehensive. And I also love he just totally gives Bucky a pass on the super soldier thing. He hates all super soldiers except Bucky. He's just like, and my headcanon is just like, he just kind of likes hanging out with him, so he doesn't mind that he's in violation of his principles. But yeah, I found him super entertaining the entire time. His relationship with both Sam and Bucky was a lot of fun. And I like that he acknowledged that Steve Rogers was a force for good. He was like, that is one point against my argument. I will acknowledge that.
Yeah, he's even though he is inherently like a bad guy ever since Civil War, you can see that he's well educated. He isn't like what's the word? Arrogant, or I guess he's arrogant. More like stubborn. Stubborn's the word I'm looking for. He's willing to acknowledge mistakes, like with Bucky Barn, or like Steve Rogers, like you were just talking about.
Yeah.
He's complex. He's got layers. One of the things that I kind of wish to see a little bit more, like I guess when he was introduced, it was really quickly at the start of the third episode, and it was a quick speed release from the prison. Like, okay, you're not gonna like this, but I broke him out of prison. Here's
like, let me present a hypothetical.
Yeah, like I appreciated that, and I thought that was really neat, and it really it was like, okay, yes, let's get the plot moving, let's get him just going. Like, let's not like do this whole long elaborate thing of like trying to break him out from prison. But simultaneously, I was kind of hoping for a little bit longer of a conversation between Zemo and Bucky, in that like kind of with the glass separator, maybe something a little bit more akin of like the Hannibal Lecter conversation to Silence of the Lambs, Jodie Foster kind of standing there for a long time, and it's this core.
I do see why they avoided it though, because that trope got played out a lot in the last decade. It's like it happened in Skyfall, James Bond. It happened with Loki in the Avengers. It happened with Joker, kind of in the Dark Knight. So I can see why they avoided it, because it started to become a joke online. The people in glass prisons. It's like, oh, they're definitely not getting out, are they?
Yeah. I guess
I agree. I would have liked to see more conversation between them, but
yeah.
Aside from being a comic accurate costume piece, what's the deal with this mask?
I was very interested. Like, I mean, before the series even started, when we were just getting the trailers and stuff, at least the fan theories I was seeing online was it was like kind of like a mocking thing, because it kind of looked like Thanos' face, but it is a comic accurate.
And he just grabbed it out of one of his cars.
Yeah, so clearly it's not like to mock the Avengers. It's like, I think it has something more to do with his family.
Maybe, maybe we'll find out more about it when we see him again, because we will. That's in any doubt. I just enjoyed his screen presence a lot, and I also love like how he's just kind of like when Walker handcuffs him to the thing, he's like, that's really unnecessary, but I get it. Like he's not mad when people are like really angry with him and roughing him around and taking him to prison. Like when the Dora Milaje show up to take him to Wakanda to the raft. They don't take him to Wakanda, which is interesting. But to take him to the raft, he was like, whatever, it's fine.
He's like, I understand, I'll go. Like,
it's like I get it.
Yeah,
he does have his butler blow up the Flag Smashers, but
so that was an interesting part too, of like, it just happened. Like his butler took care of it. I don't need to worry about those super soldiers. My work has been completed.
Right. Yeah. Zemo was a great presence.
It'll be interesting to see what happens to him moving forward. Like I don't know anything about the like I know there's like something to do with the Thunderbolts, like the I don't know exactly what about that is. Like, I know
I don't know exactly what it is either. I do know that in the comics, General Ross,
thank you.
William Hurt's character, is his comic book nickname is like General Thunderbolt Ross, and he assembles a team of like captured villains to work for him. And the theory is that like characters that are being put in the raft are being put together to eventually have a Thunderbolts type thing.
Suicide Squad.
Yeah, maybe it is like Suicide Squad actually, but I think, and I could be wrong. I think their initial play in the comic books was there was an event. It may have even been Secret Wars where all the heroes are missing, and so General Ross puts together his like dark unit of people to do his bidding. And General Ross is a pretty shady guy too. So
yeah, well, like I'm curious to see what happens to Zemo next, because yeah, the trailers definitely made him seem like he was going to be the villain of this series. He clearly wasn't.
Yeah, no.
He was more of an ally. So yeah, I was curious to see, what's going to happen with him next. Is he going to keep being a bad guy if he gets released from the raft? What's going to happen on the raft? So very interested to see him be cycled back through in future Marvel projects.
I like that they're getting to a point, and I think the television format helps them do this, where there are villains that are just in existence in the world. That's how it is in comic books, but it's never really been the case in the Marvel movies. Usually, like, they fight the villain for the movie. In most cases, they kill the villain and then they move on. It's nice that there is a world being populated by antagonists and third parties that exist outside of just the hero's mission of the day. It allows for longer form arcs and storytelling. And speaking of that, I think let's talk about Sharon Carter a bit.
Yes, let's talk about Sharon. Did you see, clearly spoilers, but did you see the reveal coming at the end?
Kind of. I
didn't.
I wasn't sure if they were. I knew there was more to her than they were letting us know. But I wasn't sure exactly what it was going to be. I did not think that she was going to be the power broker until the final episode when she shows back up, because it's like at that point, what's the reveal going to be that is satisfying? Unless it was Julie Louis-Dreyfus, who shows up and is now in Marvel, which is great. I love Julie Louis-Dreyfus.
She's fantastic.
Yeah, I was like, there's something going on with Sharon here.
Yeah. Do you think... Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, go for it.
I was just going to ask, do you think that that she is part of the Secret Invasion, or is she like an independent third party who's now just gone rogue?
Well, Secret Invasion is Skrulls. I don't think she's a Skrull. I think she's just Sharon Carter who has gone rogue. And I want to ask you this too. Do you think she is a villain, or you think she's just trying to be out for herself? Like, what do you think her sort of meta role is in a narrative? Like,
that's a good question.
She's just a third party who works with shady people now, which to me is more interesting than just being a straight up villain.
Yeah, I would agree. I really hope that she's not like just a straight up villain. I hope she's like more like just looking out for herself. But several years have elapsed since we last saw her. I think her last appearance was in Civil War, and she was a good guy there, who was on the right side. And then, all this time has passed. And then, from what I understand, she didn't evaporate with the blip.
I think she did.
I
think she did. I think her name shows up in Endgame as one of the people who got evaporated. And I think that was a mistake, actually. I think it would have been more impactful if she was not blipped, because especially like she seems to have some grievance with the US government, because everyone else who helped Cap in Civil War got kind of like accepted back, but she didn't. And if she didn't get accepted back in those 5 years of the blip, like that would have made her motivation even stronger, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was assuming, that she had been like, it's been several years since Civil War, and she had also stuck around for the entire 5 years of the blip.
So it's been 7 years since Civil War, so it's like
so she's had plenty of time for her character to change, and for her to kind of feel betrayed by the government, to feel like an outcast, and to start to think like, I have all these special skills. Why don't I start looking out for numero uno, which is me? So let's just do that. And it's I'm very interested to see more of her and to see. And I honestly think that I might actually go back and rewatch the series now, or at least like her scenes in the series.
Yeah.
Now that I know that she's a power broker, and now that I know that she like had all this power all along, and that she's actually kind of, a shady person. I think that definitely puts like all of her scenes in the series in a different light. So it might be worthwhile to just kind of like go back and see if there's anything else.
Right. And I think I'm just gonna treat it as my headcanon probably that she didn't get blipped. I doubt it's going to make an actual difference in the text itself, so I can just imagine what I want, because I think it makes it better. And I think the hints that we get along the way, it's like in one scene when she's talking to Sam, she's like on an iPad scrolling through satellite footage that's being sent to her live. I'm like, she has a lot of power.
Yeah.
So she's either, I thought she was going to be like working for the power broker or under the power broker's thumb or something like that, but I think it is more interesting that that's her now.
I think
and
so
she
too.
was utilizing the Flag Smashers for something before they went rogue against her and stole the serums. So I'm intrigued to see what happens to her later on, because she wasn't like a particularly interesting character before the show, but now I think she kind of is. So
I would agree. Yeah, and it's nice to see someone going against expectations and changing in a different way. Because I feel like it's always like, oh, I'm the bad guy, like Loki. He's changing to good. Like he's slowly becoming a good guy over time. So it's nice to see that someone has done the exact 180, who was like this very well-regarded person for so many years and has the Carter name, and now she's changed and she's gone the opposite way.
Yeah, I also think just kind of evidence that I don't think they planned the MCU out quite as much as a lot of people like to say, and they like to say it specifically when criticizing the Star Wars sequels. But if the plan was always for Steve to go back and end up with Peggy Carter in the 50s, they probably would not have had him kiss Sharon Carter in Civil War, because, like, bro, that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, that might be your daughter.
Well, no, she's like Peggy's grandniece or something.
Oh, yes, granddaughter, excuse me.
Could you imagine, like, being Sharon Carter and finding out through the grapevine somehow that this guy you kissed and was teased that you would have a relationship with went back in time to marry your great aunt?
That's a bit problematic, yeah.
That would make me very unhappy.
Yeah, and considering how honest Steve is, I bet he probably told her, oh yeah, I made out with your granddaughter.
Yeah. Well, I love those comics that people made in the time where it's like Steve and Peggy like living their lives and all these world tragedies are happening or something, and he's just like, maybe let's not go to this place on this day. Seems like a bad idea. Or one of them is like, oh, President Kennedy's going to Dallas. I'm sure that'll be nice. And Steve's like,
Let's go to the zoo. Yeah, let's go to the zoo.
Yeah, but I bring that up only because it's like they didn't plan every detail of the MCU out, guys. It's a very out of character thing for Steve to do.
Yes, and I mean,
which is fine. It's a very minor thing, but like don't understand what you're saying before you make a claim like that. Like,
yeah, and I mean, it circles back to the whole concept of Steve's a good man, and he knows not to fuck with the fabric of space and time. So he'll make the right choices, and we all know that. But
I just mean in terms of like the Sharon Peggy thing. Like they wrote that because when they were writing Civil War, they probably intended for Steve to remain in modern times.
Yeah.
And due to Chris Evans expressing interest in ending his time as the character and also having a satisfying end point for the character, they probably changed their minds when creating the Infinity War Endgame arc and had him go back in time. It's the like having to work with real actors as opposed to just drawings on a comic page presents a limitation for the writers of Marvel, which I think is a good limitation. It's like once the actor is done playing the character, you can sign that character off and you can make it permanent. Like,
right. Totally makes sense.
Totally. Let's see who we got left. We've got.
I guess we could talk about Isaiah real briefly, but we did kind of already talk about him.
We talked about him a little bit, but I enjoyed his performance. I thought everything he had to say was impactful and right. Like I got his point of view. And I also enjoyed him in contrast to Sam. and how
Yes.
Sam was able to bring hope back to Isaiah, I think.
Yeah, I appreciated that. He's a good, strong character. I'll ask this question: would you be interested in, like, say, a series of Isaiah, maybe or even maybe a movie where it just highlights his struggle or something like that, or maybe I don't know, stuff that happened that he worked on when he was Super Soldier for America?
I think so. And I mean, the actor who plays him is younger than he looks in the show, I think. So maybe they did that intentionally to have some flashbacks to him. I would like to see him face off with Bucky back in his time. Like, I'd like to see the mission that's talked about, because they mentioned they know each other from that time.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see that if it's a story that they can tell without retreading ground that they did with the original Captain America movies. But I guess from the perspective of a black man in the 50s, that's going to be inherently different than a Steve Rogers story. So I do like that we're getting little seeds of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's past, up until, I don't know, Ant-Man or something. It kind of seemed like there was Captain America in World War II, and then there weren't really superheroes until Tony Stark made his armor. But now we're starting to get Hank Pym was doing Black Ops as Ant-Man in the Cold War for S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
And now we know about Isaiah Bradley, and there were probably more characters doing stuff. So it opens the door for more period pieces in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which would be cool.
I don't know. Clearly, we're not super big comic book nerds, but I did see something that the younger or Isaiah's grandson is, I think, a character, a superhero character later on in the comics. I'm not exactly sure what his role is.
Oh, okay.
But I think that he might have a bigger developing role moving forward as well. He might have a cameo in, I don't know, Captain America 4 or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I certainly don't know what I'm talking about. So
I do know that Joaquin Torres, I think is the guy's name, but Sam's military friend, becomes Falcon. He becomes Falcon. Okay. So
that'll be cool. That'll be cool.
So when Sam takes up the Captain America mantle, that guy becomes Falcon, which I'm guessing we'll see in Captain America 4 or on down the line. I don't know what their focus is going to be in Cap 4, but I'm excited to see Sam be the new Captain America. The face of the Avengers universe their faces, I guess, are starting to change. We've got Sam Wilson as Captain America. It looks like maybe Natalie Portman will stick around for more than one movie as the Thor character, the Jane Foster Thor. I'm
okay with that.
Next gen slate of heroes coming up. Excited to see where it goes. Guess we can.
Before we kind of start to close out here, or move on. Let's see. I just have one question about what would you say the theme of this series is, or themes? I had initially predicted, I wrote down in my notes. I was trying to take notes episode by episode. So when I first watched the first episode of the series, I jotted down real quick what I thought the theme would be, and I thought it was going to be kind of a continuation of the past two projects of Phase 4 of the MCU, which are Spider-Man: Far From Home and WandaVision, which kind of dealt with these concepts of illusion and perception and reality. And I kind of thought that was going to come to light a little bit more through the Flag Smashers, that maybe there would be some kind of conspiracy theory elements to it and whatnot. But that clearly didn't happen.
Right.
So I don't know. What would you say would the theme of this series be?
I think it's the relationship between being black and the iconography of America is a big part of it, and legacy, and I guess what it means to bear a symbol like that, be part of it, and also just responsibility in the face of change.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see some themes of self-discovery and grief a little bit there, or at least coping with trauma with Bucky and him kind of dealing with his own personal struggles. But becoming Captain America with the self-discovery, and it definitely touched on those feelings of, or those themes of racism in America, institutionalized racism, immigration as well, with the refugees around the world. So I feel like there's a lot of different themes here for sure.
Yeah, I think it Just closing thoughts. Unless we have more and.
I don't know. I guess did you have? I'm just looking. We have we're just got our show notes up here on the screen, and I'm just looking through at some of the complaints that we had because I mean, overall, I think this series was very strong. Didn't have far too many complaints with it. If I have to be nitpicky, of course, I'd say I was a little bit disappointed with the amount of screen time and story focus that Zemo had. Wish he was a bigger role, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I guess one other thing. Did you like in the final episode? He as Captain America, he pushes the whole SUV back, and he gets it up, and then there's this whole crowd of people, and they're applauding him and stuff and taking videos. How did you feel about that?
I don't know. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
It's very like old school kind of Raimi Spider-Man feeling a little bit, but I think it plays into what they're going for, and it's like the fact that they're like, that's Captain America, and like they're embracing him as Cap, which I think it's earned a little bit of cheesiness at that point.
That's fair.
And I don't think cheese in this genre is a particularly negative thing. It's like we're watching grown-ass adults run around in brightly colored spandex things fighting each other. Like I do take this more seriously than probably a lot of people do, but I understand the silliness of the genre. It's okay for it to lead into that every once in a while. Not everything has to be as like grounded as The Dark Knight, which we talked about last time.
It doesn't have to be super serious, and it doesn't have to be like, there has to be like one meaning, one message to pull out of the story. You can pull what you want from it. I just kind of felt like, that the crowd reacting, that's fine. It works. I just had this note of being like, that is some good old-fashioned propaganda right there.
It is a little, I mean, and Captain America as a concept is a little bit propaganda-ish. I mean,
yes.
But I think the way Sam takes ownership of the mantle is sort of and I think Steve did this too, because Steve walked away from the U.S. government several times throughout his run. But I think the idea of Captain America is it's not a symbol of America. It's a symbol of what America could and should be. It's an ideal that's better than the reality. Because all the like stupid conservative pundits are like, could you imagine Captain America denouncing America? It's like, you mean like he does all the time because America isn't living up to the values that it espouses? Like that's the nature of our country is we have all these high ideals and we have never lived up to any of them. And we need to. Like, if we're going to call ourselves the greatest country in the world, we better damn be it.
We got to live up to it.
Most of our citizens, So I think I think the propaganda as an art form is very like intention driven and meant to inspire people to act in a certain way, and it has a negative connotation for the most part because we think of propaganda in terms of brainwashing, but propaganda is not inherently negative. It's just media with a message, like a politically motivated message, and that could be good or bad. And inspiring people to be less racist is a pretty good message to send. So you can accomplish that with corny stuff.
That's a very good point. I mean, otherwise, I didn't really have very many complaints with this series, and I think we talked about most of them. Do you have any? Should we move into closing thoughts?
I mean, I'll just say the only complaint I have is that it was just a little too busy, and it didn't have enough time to focus on everything it tried to do. But I think the core message of Sam's story got through great. I just would have liked more from the Bucky side of it too, with him and Yuri. Like, he doesn't really get to have he does get closure, I guess, but we don't see the entire road to it because it's kind of just plopped in at the beginning and end. I did love the ending scene at the boat dock where they're all just having a good time, and Bucky has like the 3 kids on his arm. Closing thoughts. Great show, I think.
Actually, before I move into that, one other thing that I just kind of wanted to point out, just kind of circling back to the Flag Smashers before I put in my closing thoughts. But I think the ending was very satisfying, and I think it wrapped up, the storyline very well, especially Carly's storyline, I think that got wrapped up decently. But one note that I had here was like, honestly, if I was a hardcore Flag Smasher follower, and even after Carly died, and Captain America gave that speech on live TV, the GCP plans or whatever,
GRC,
GRC, thank you. Those things changed or whatever. I feel like I'd still be a Flag Smasher. I feel like I don't know. I feel like the movement wouldn't necessarily die after all these events. I feel like we haven't seen the end of the Flag Smashers. Even if they know about the app and the deal has changed, I just feel like maybe they might adapt to the situation.
I think you may be right. And we also don't know what the result of Sam's speech is going to be. But he was basically like saying, "Do your job, be better, like figure it out if it's complicated." So because. And I mean, the GRC was an interesting thing too, because they're just like, we're just gonna send everybody back to where they came from. That's our way to solve this problem. It's like, does that really help?
Yeah, right.
Solve this problem doesn't seem so. I did appreciate just how like the guy is trying to like explain himself to Sam, and Sam's like, dude, shut up. No, you're.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I forgot to mention that earlier. But yeah, I mean, overall closing thoughts for this series. I think we were very on the same page about this. It's a solid series all the way through. A lot crammed into those 6 episodes. A lot of different things going on. So a little bit hectic, a little bit confusing. But all the characters are really strong. They're really well developed, and I wish there was a little bit more Bucky and a little bit more Zemo. But I'm very happy with this series overall. I'm glad about how it touched on PTSD and immigration and racism in America as well. So I'd 100% recommend that everyone check this out. Even if you aren't really a big Marvel fan, I think it's worth your time to at least just, watch a few of these episodes. I think you might get, you'll connect with something in this series.
Yeah, it's a good show. And it's a good step for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I enjoy seeing them take more chances in different ways. I want to see more and more of that in the future. Like, this series is established enough to where you can do pretty much whatever. So take advantage of that on a creative front,
Totally.
But yeah, I would recommend this show, obviously. But I'd
100%.
So what else have you been watching, reading?
Invincible, of course.
I've got to finish that tonight.
Yeah, we will, of course, put out an episode about Invincible in the near future. We got a different episode coming up next week. I've been watching Invincible. It's a fantastic show. Would highly recommend it. I've also been watching this series called Exhibit A on Netflix. It is there's only 4 episodes or something like that, but it is highlighting how some pieces of like scientific evidence, like DNA evidence or like blood splatter or like corpse dogs that like go out and find or like try to find traces of corpses. And how that evidence is great at times in real life court trials and stuff like that. But it also, this series is highlighting instances where that evidence has locked up the wrong people, or at least been used against the wrong people, where it's like, oh yeah, he touched this shoe once, and they're trying to build an entire DNA evidence case against him about this hate crime, and it's like that. What? Like a lot of the it's a great series. I would recommend it just because it's like it brings to light these difficult issues with the justice system and how DNA evidence can be misconstrued sometimes. It's very cool. And I just watched this movie the other day called Good Time. It's got Robert Pattinson in it. It's a really cool movie. So it's Robert Pattinson. He has this mentally challenged brother, and they commit a bank robbery, and it's ill-fated, and everything is just a series of events that just keep getting worse and worse and worse over time. It's really fun. It's a really fun story because not only is like Robert Pattinson just an incredible actor, like I'll watch kind of anything that he's in except for Twilight. I will not watch Twilight. But I think just the series of events that happen in the movie are really interesting, and you'll just once you start it, you won't want to stop watching it. It's just really cool overall. That's about it for me. What have you been watching lately?
Let's see. I finished the third Stormlight book. That was super good. Finished that on Monday.
Nice.
What else I did? I did a Twitch stream on Friday. That was fun. I just played some Warcraft 3 and some Overwatch, and I was on Twitch. Had like 2 people watching for a while. You know, it was a good time. Let's see what else have I been doing. I read another one of the Thor graphic novels, one of the trade paperbacks. So that story's going along.
Nice.
Pretty cool. Loki was in this one. It was fun. And I got to watch Invincible tonight. Finish that up. I missed it the last 2 weeks. But and I watched Mortal Kombat, which we're going to talk about in our next episode, which we're pre-recording that, so we're going to take like a lunch break and then hop back on to talk about that. But that's really all that I've been doing. Oh, I started reading Sherlock Holmes. I have the complete works of Sherlock Holmes, so I started reading the first story.
Nice. How you liking it so far?
I've only read like 6 pages, but it's good.
It's real detailed.
I've gotten through like when Holmes and Watson meet.
Yeah.
And I've only seen Holmes for a few paragraphs at this point, but he seems very much more. He seems more like giddy than I'm used to seeing him portrayed from the one scene that he's been in. But I watched the BBC Sherlock show for a while, and that scene in that show, I remember Sherlock being more of a dick because he's a huge asshole in that show.
Absolutely.
And I'm interested to see if I'm just not interpreting Holmes like that yet in the written form, or if he is kind of less assholey in the literature one. So that'll be interesting. I'm gonna, there are a lot of stories in that book. I'll just kind of come back to it from time to time, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read a lot of Sherlock Holmes. I remember reading just like 1 or 2 of his little short stories, and the main difference that I remember between the show and the text is that in the text it actually gives you clues of like how to solve the mystery. In the show,
the show cheats so much.
Yeah, in the show it's like, oh yeah, Sherlock noticed these tiny little imprints on his shoes, and that's how he figured it out. And it's like,
or he figured it out off screen. It's like, well, that's not fair.
Yeah, it's like complete bullshit in the series, but it's still kind of fun to watch. But yeah, in the text,
I never finished it. It kind of dropped off. I liked the first 2 seasons, I think. But I don't know. It got kind of boring.
Yeah, after Moriarty, he was just the best villain in that show. So.
They obviously regretted killing him off because I keep bringing him back in flashbacks or in hallucinations every single time. Like every season cliffhanger was like, Moriarty's back, and then you start the new season, it's like, just kidding, he's not back, he's still dead because he shot himself in the head. Oh my god,
that's cool.
The way that show solves the Reichenbach fall is so stupid.
Yeah, really? That's how you do it?
He's like, Watson, stay exactly there so you can't see this crew of people put a mattress under me while I jump off of a 6-story building.
How did I plan this in advance with my brother? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right. Whatever. I have not seen the end of that show, but apparently the final episode, have you heard about this? The final episode is apparently so bad that the fans of the show were convinced that it was a red herring and there was a secret final episode upcoming, and they had this whole conspiracy theory about this other new show on the BBC that was airing in the same time slot and had one of the writers' name was Watson something or something like that, and they're like, this is secretly the actual final episode of Sherlock, and then the show aired and it wasn't. And
that's frustrating. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever finish that then.
No, I'm excited for the third Robert Downey Jr. Jude Law one when that happens.
Oh, I didn't know that they were making a third one.
Yeah, they came back to make another one.
Well, that's excellent. Yeah, that'll be a good one.
I remember those movies fondly.
Yeah, he's solid. They got a good back and forth.
Yeah. You got anything else?
No, I don't think so. But where can people find you online, Dylan? Where can they find your Twitch stream?
Oh, my Twitch stream. I'll add that to my link tree. I don't know how to find it yet, honestly. I think it's called D-Day Movies, D-Day_movies. But you can for sure find me on Instagram at DylanD1026, on Twitter at D-Day Movies, and on YouTube at D-Day Movies. Probably easiest to find through my Twitter or Instagram. Let's see. I think that's all I got. What about you? Where can people find you online?
right now, if you want to give me a follow on Instagram, that'd be all right with me. You can find me at Niles Got No Styles.
Mm-hmm.
I don't post very often, but when I do, I feel like it's decent photography and decent images.
Yeah.
So, if you want, feel free. But yeah, I mean, we are posting regularly on the Play, Pause,
Rewind
podcast.
That's the name of our show.
Play, pause, rewind. Come on.
Yep. Yeah, so we are gonna hop off and eat some lunch real quick, and then we're gonna come back and pre-record Mortal Kombat. And we had some internet difficulties halfway through this, so hopefully our recording came out fine. If you're watching this, it probably did. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. If you watch on YouTube, please maybe subscribe, leave a like, drop a comment, boost that engagement a little bit. If you're on a podcast platform, leave a review or tell a friend. That helps us out a ton in the SEO of those platforms, I am told. So thank you all again very much, and have a good week. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Stop that.